Hey, I'm Dr. John Vanderslice, continuing my talks on the essentials of fiction writing. This subject is one of my favorite to talk about and actually do as a writer, and that is to write dialogue. I've found that some writers feel very comfortable and eager to put dialogue into their stories. Other writers are more wary. It's a skill that seems almost magical to some people. And I don't think you need to have fear about writing dialogue. I do think you need to feel kind of an urgency, a necessity to write dialogue. The reason why I say that is I never feel like I believe the characters or that they actually seem real to me unless I hear characters speak. Otherwise, I feel like they're just almost like robots under the control of the author. They don't have their own agency. And it's really, really important that your characters have agency. The reader needs to feel that your characters are actually living people that can go do things that are wonderful and surprising. It's surprising to the author as well. The reader shouldn't feel like the entire story is just a setup, planned by the author and then carried out to the last minute. There needs to be more sense of life to it. And dialogue is the best way, one of the best ways, to bring life and urgency and excitement to a story. So that would be one fundamental reason to use dialogue, is because it gives your characters agency. They become actual living people who can do things that maybe you didn't expect as the author, which is actually the best situation for the author is the characters are acting in ways you had not expected. You're just kind of watching what you write. Another wonderful aspect of using dialogue is that it will reveal, almost better than anything, character personality. Obviously, you want your characters to have interesting and demonstrable personalities. Otherwise, why should the reader care about them? Well, one of the best ways to show a character's personality is through dialogue. Show rather than tell. We always, as writers, want to lean toward the showing. We want to create an experience for your reader rather than give them a speech or an argument. You want to create a living experience for your reader. And so you want your characters to have personality, and you want to show those personalities to the reader. Another really important benefit of using dialogue is for pacing. You may have noticed when you read a story that when the characters start interacting, it moves a lot quicker. You get more engaged as a reader. I love writing description, I love reading description, but I have encountered stories where page after page goes by and nothing has really happened yet. Well, dialogue forces things to happen, or at least it should. So it'll speed up your stories. It'll make it a more entertaining experience for the reader. Another benefit of using dialogue is that it may not always, but it can show the character's age. You probably notice that people of different ages don't necessarily talk the exact same way. We're all talking pretty much most of the time the same language, but we're using perhaps different vocabularies in that language, emphasizing different words. There may be slang that a certain group knows very well, and a group that's either older or younger will not know. And so that is one side benefit of showing, using dialogue in stories, that again, is part of revealing to the reader who these people are, without even necessarily just stating outright. You can just show. Similarly, time period. What time is the story set in? This becomes a lot more important if you're writing historical fiction, in which the time period in which the story is set is super crucial to get right. And in that case, having the dialogue sound right for the time is a very, very important consideration. But it even shows the time period if you're writing a story set in the present day. Also, a very important element of fiction writing that gets developed through using dialogue is your plot. Every story has some plot, right? There has to be something to hook the reader and keep it going. Well, what happens in the plot of your story should be affected by the dialogue you use. The energy, the conversations between characters, the agreements, the disagreements, that makes things happen in the story. The next important event in your story could very well happen just because of the conversation that your two characters have, your three characters have. That is very often the case. So don't think of dialogue as something that's kind of floating above the essential framework of the story. Dialogue is part of the essential framework. It creates the essential framework of your story. So these are some really important benefits of using dialogue in a story. But I also want to briefly touch on what, to me, makes good when you read a dialogue and you think it's good dialogue. Why? What are the characteristics that make that dialogue effective? Well, the first is it has to be believable. Believable, what I mean by that is believable to those people who are speaking. You may have had experience with reading a book, you're reading a story, you're watching a movie, where characters are talking to each other, and you just say to yourself, I don't buy that person would say that, or I don't buy that person would say it in that way. And that's a huge red flag to a reader, and it causes the reader to lose confidence in you and your story. So make sure it's believable to the characters. Make sure it's relevant to the story you're telling. You do not want your characters to be talking about subjects that don't really finally affect the story, that are outside what's really crucial to your story. If a conversation happens on the page, that's a sign to the reader, like, hey, pay attention. Here's what you really got to notice what's going on. Things are going to happen between my characters. So if you do that, please make sure it's relevant. Another important aspect of writing good dialogue is what I call its adversarial qualities. And this kind of goes along with being relevant. And that is, sure, in the real world, you want, ideally, that people are very polite to each other. In fiction, you want to make sure it's not just polite talk. If you're going to the trouble of writing the dialogue and include it in your pages of your story, you want that dialogue to generate action. You want to cause conflict, perhaps, or maybe it's a funny moment. You want it there to make something happen. And often in fiction, that means an adversarial energy between your characters. I'm not saying people need to be arguing at the top of their lungs all the time, but there ought to be something that there's two sides are kind of wrangling with, that the dialogue helps flesh out and show to the reader. So do not just include dialogue to have people talk about ordering pizza. You can get that done in one sentence. Yeah, they ordered pizza. You do not need to show that dialogue to the reader. You really do need to show the kinds of dialogue in which conflicts are being displayed and exacerbated. The last aspect of good dialogue writing, I want to get it, is that it should be realistic, but not actually real. What I mean by that is, if you set up a recorder, a tape recorder with your family or your friends, you accidentally turn on the recording device on your phone, you record people talking. How often is that talk interesting and memorable? And how often does that talk get blurred or have hems and haws in it? Ums and ahs. That would happen quite a lot in the real world. So you don't actually want your dialogue in your fiction to strictly imitate realistic conversations between people. What you want is it to seem realistic and to be believable, and credible, and relevant, but also have craftsmanship to it. You, the writer, have to craft the dialogue just like you craft everything else in your story, and that means put energy and attention into it. Don't just spell words on the page, but pay attention to how you want your characters to speak. And this is not actually, it's not an impossible task. Writers who are used to using the dialogue understand that it's shaped like anything else in the story, and that will help your story immensely. So please go have fun with dialogue. Don't be afraid of it, but do craft it. Thank you.